the peace that passeth all understanding. And that's it. And so is the love.
This is Beyond with Heather Tesch, where we examine near-death experiences and life itself, hopefully making this life a little better. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And hello to my guest and welcome, Karen Thomas.
Hi.
It is so great to have you here. You shared your remarkable story with lots of details, and that was in the last episode, and we'll have a link to that in the description. But stick around too for this one, because we're going to really dig into some of the things that you saw and felt and experienced. So let's start on the big one that is so nice to hear. Tell us more about that love and peace that you felt.
Oh, it's very indescribable. It's so hard to put into words something that is beyond anything that you have ever experienced before, and that is such an overwhelming type of a sensation. It's, well, because I had gone to church before, one of the phrases that triggers it with me is the peace that passeth all understanding. And that's it.
Oh.
And so is the love. It's just so all consuming, all absorbed, everything all in one. And it's beyond the words. And so that's why it's kind of hard for me to really elaborate on it more, other than to say that it's very difficult to put into words, but it just is so life-changing. It's something that once you have experienced it, nothing else is ever the same in your life, and how you relate to people, how you live and behave, how you interpret pretty much all sorts of things that happen throughout the rest of your life. It's just continually there, and it's continually present, even if it's just the memory of it that's so strong.
Well, clearly there's a lot of emotion that is attached to it.
Yeah, there is. I think so often people will ask a near-death experiencer, well, wasn't this just a really powerful dream? Wasn't this a hallucination? And how can you tell that it's really different than that, and that it is so real? And part of it is that it's something that is so still alive within you and so still present with you, that when you talk about it to other people, you are right there. And like I've mentioned to people before, that when I try to think about the hospital that I work, if I were to go back there now, 40 some years later, be able to remember how to take you to the physical therapy department that I worked in, because I just don't remember that much about the building and about, the specifics. But the specifics of my near-death experience are right there and very detailed, and certainly not something that I could tell you about a dream that I had 40 years ago, or about a hallucination that actually, when I was recovering, they did give me one medication in ICU that did cause me to have some hallucinations. It's entirely different. Hallucinations, I guess, tend to be very disjointed and very, nothing kind of links logically together. They just are, very scattered and totally different than what happened, what a near-death experience is.
And I think it's that emotion that I hear from people, along with how they've changed, That really is what's so convincing to me, that people have had near-death experiences and they actually did experience this. And it's so much more than a hallucination.
Oh,
Karen, when you were kind of floating first above your body in the operating room and then you were going throughout the hospital, a force pulled you back and upward. What was that force?
I don't know if when I've talked to try to explain it to people, I say the only thing I've seen that resembles it is the tractor beam in I think it's the Star Wars movies, where a spaceship is moving and then suddenly this beam is on it and it's pulled. It's not generating its own movement, it is pulled. And that's literally the type of feeling that it had, was that, well, I'm not in control anymore. I can't steer this anymore. Whether I want or I don't want, I am being pulled. And that's what it was like.
So you were pulled through a tunnel and then you ended up in kind of a brown, rocky, dry place. Where do you think that was?
Well, for a long time, I had no idea. No, nothing made sense out of that. And it was 30 years later, and after a lot of learning and a lot of consciousness education on my part, and a lot of other things that had taken place, and meditation, learning to meditate. Um, in meditation, I would, from time to time, see my guide again and see him as he had appeared during my near-death experience. And, I never really got a whole lot of direct communication from him. But this one time, he appeared in a meditation to me, and he communicated, we lived together thousands of years ago in South America. And then the next thing he communicated was, my name is Carlos. And so as I keep a journal of my meditations and I record them, and usually right after. And so I recorded this, and I thought, well, that's bizarre, because I know thousands of years ago in South America, there weren't any Carloses. The Spaniards came a long time after that. But I just kind of set it aside. And then it was only about a week or so after that, and I went to a consciousness conference that was in Raleigh, North Carolina, near where I live here. And in between sessions, there was a woman who was speaking, who had a few people around listening to her over by the snack table. And for some reason, I was drawn over to her. And she was talking about teaching healing touch to people in South America, where she had just been, and about how she was, besides teaching that, she was going to sacred sites in Peru. And that this young man who was a native to South America and had been in her class, had offered to drive her to one of these sites when her ride fell through. And he took her there. And, she said, he's just such an amazingly intuitive and wise person. And she said, I have a holistic center, and next week, Carlos is coming to my holistic center. And so as she was saying all this, I was feeling all of this sensation inside, that this was not just an offhand conversation. And in fact, I broke down in tears listening to it. And so I told her I had this near-death experience all these years ago, and during my experience, and and that my guide, had appeared in a meditation and had told me his name is Carlos, and that we had lived together thousands of years ago in South America. And she said, oh, let me show you the picture of Carlos on my phone. And when she brought it up, he looked exactly like my guide, only modern clothes. And when I had described the near-death experience to her, the area that I had come out into, she said, "Oh, Al Supe." She said, "That's a 5 or 6 thousand year old sacred site there in Peru that we had gone to visit." And she showed me pictures, and it was exactly the way what I had seen.
So that would mean, though, Carlos is in the heavenly realm as well as being here in the earthly realm.
Exactly. And it was, I couldn't understand it, and I was trying to make sense out of it and talking to this lady who I had just met, and explained to me that I should read Michael Newton and its Journey of Souls. And she said in that he was a hypnotherapist who had hypnotized a lot of people and was finding that he was able to bring them back to not only past lives, but in between past lives and present lives. And she said he explains in that every person who incarnates on earth, there is always a percent of their essence or their higher self that remains on the other side. And they literally are on the other side and living an incarnated life at the same time.
Some other people that you met, or you at least saw, was your family. Now, when you saw your guide, you described his feet and the sandals he wore. So he obviously had feet. You looked down, you didn't have feet. So I assume you're an energetic body. What about your family? When you saw your dad and your brother and the rest of your family, what did they look like?
They looked very much like the spiritual people that I also saw later on. But they looked, I knew who they were. My dad looked much younger than when he had passed away. All of them looked to be, prime of life, 30, maybe around that age period as far as how they looked. But still, it was more of a recognition, soul to soul, of who we were, as opposed to, they looked exactly like they looked the last time that I saw them.
Did you get a sense if they were happy and content where they were?
Oh yeah, definitely so. Definitely.
And do you think that everybody who passes from this life to the next will be reunited with people they love?
Yes, I do. Um, Again, I think a lot of that finally made some sense to me when I read Michael Newton's books, and when I read especially the portion about that everyone leaves a percentage of their higher self, their individuality on the other side at all times, even when they're living a life here on earth. That it's a percent of the whole of who we are that we have within us when we're living this life on earth. And that made a lot of sense to me too, because I also now believe in reincarnation. And I know other people who believe in reincarnation have said or have asked the question, well, my loved one, they passed away decades and decades ago. And, what if when I pass away, they've already incarnated into another human life and I won't see them. They'll be gone. They'll be somewhere else. And no, because that percentage of their true self is always there, even if another percentage of themselves has reincarnated into another lifetime. So they are always there to greet you when it's your turn to pass over.
You also had a life review. How has that life review shaped how you live your life now?
Tremendously, because once you literally live that experience of being the other person that you're interacting with, and being able to sense their reactions it carries over, so that when you're interacting with other people, the vast majority of the time you're thinking about you're trying to put yourself into someone else's shoes, okay, before you even begin interacting, and as you're interacting with them, and knowing how that, I also saw how that ripples out from them to other people. So if you have done something that really hurt someone, then they then carry that, not just in a reaction to you forever or for a long time, but they also, it flows out of them to other people. It passes out in a negative way to other people who had nothing whatever to do with it. And it, in the same way, the positive happens that way. That when you have been a kind and a compassionate person to someone, and they have felt that, and it meant a lot in the instance that they were experiencing, then when they encounter a situation where it could be really helpful to that other person to treat them kindly and compassionately, they're more likely to do so. It carries over, and then that carries over from them. So once you've seen that and really lived it, it doesn't go away. Uh, Which isn't to say that we're perfect people, because people get mad, people get hurt, people get upset. It's part of our human nature, and you will continue to have those types of feelings, but you have something else as a buffer to catch yourself up short, and to re re-examine what you're doing and how you're reacting, and certainly not carry things on like grudges and now continuing hurtful behaviors.
And as humans, we do screw up.
Oh yeah.
But are there things that we can do that are wrong, or things that we believe that are wrong, that can screw us up permanently from going to where you went?
Not permanently, no. um, because no matter how long it may take, and no matter how much you have to experience the other side and the outcome of all of that badness, eventually that spark of unconditional love of our creator that's within us is finally able to come forth and to overcome, and to not no longer be a barrier.
And are we the ones that are judging ourselves, or is someone else judging us?
Oh, we're the ones judging ourselves. Like I said, I was immediately judging myself, and those others that were with me, that, by the way, I immediately felt on seeing them that I should know who they were, that they cared deeply about me, and that they in fact had helped me plan the life that I was living. And so, yeah, it's that's how it is.
You experienced seeing prayers as musical notes. So, did you learn anything about the power of prayer?
Um, yes, I believe that prayer is just kind of the embodiment of that spark of unconditional love within us and compassion within us, and that it has an energetic power that is very, very important and powerful, whether we realize it or not. And I think the thing that I learned most about prayer is that the power of that is important regardless of what the outcome that you're praying about is, beyond what we can really think of. And also that I used to pray in ways that were mostly self-centered, in terms of, I said it was almost like asking the genie to grant the wishes. And that when people by rote keep repeating a prayer with an outcome that they want, give me this, or it's got to be that, it's losing the entire concept of what prayer actually is. Prayer is just kind of a magnification of the ability for that love and compassion to accomplish a very strong positive thing. And what that strong positive thing will vary from person to person and circumstance to circumstance, but it is nonetheless very powerful and very important.
What do you think that humans get wrong the most about God?
I think what they get wrong the most about God is personifying God as a huge, powerful, strong being that must act in the same way that a human being likely would act if they were that huge, if they were that strong, if they were that powerful. And I think that's where they go wrong, because human nature has so much duality about it, in that there are what we consider hurtful and what we consider helpful, what we consider bad, what we consider good. And all that duality is just for this human life experience. But it is not what our Creator is at all. And so all of the descriptions of God as wiping out this that was bad, and lifting up this over here because they were favorable, and all of that duality, as opposed to just huge unconditional love, peace, and joy, and all of that, which is what God is, always is.
And what do you think that we tend to get wrong about the afterlife?
Well, again, I can only judge from, the fundamentalist Christian background. And I think that what many people tend to get wrong, that coming from that background, is that it is a place that only is achieved by certain people. And then that it is just kind of a place where they spend all of their time worshiping and praising God, and basically just being totally focused on that worship. And this may sound kind of weird, but I never got the impression from the light that I experienced that it had any desire to be worshiped at all. And that the desire was for those of us who our Creator had created to grow in the ability to love one another, and have within them the ability to live peacefully, live joyfully. That it was all focused that way, not focused on worship. And the other thing I felt about Christianity that was really rough was that you're taught that you're worthless. You are absolutely so sinful and so bad and so unworthy and so impossible to be anything good unless you are saved or until you are saved. And that also was something that I felt was very much not how our creator looks at us at all.
So many people talk about the oneness and that we're all connected. Did you get a sense of that when you were having your near death experience?
Yes and no. Um, I felt throughout my experience that I was still very much uniquely me, and that my personality and who I was intact, and that it was just my unique self. However, and I felt everyone else the same way. However, I also felt that within every single one of us and beings that I encountered, we all had that same original one spark of Holy Spirit, of the divine within us that was indistinguishable one from another. So kind of a combination of both. It's kind of hard to describe that. But I think one of the things that some people really are concerned about is is when they pass on, will they no longer have any sort of identity at all that was who they were, um, or concern or care about anything or anyone that they deeply loved and cared for? Will that all just poof go into a cloud of dust and they're just some individual, you know, tiny thing that is no longer them and is only part of a giant ocean? Um, and I didn't get that sensation at all. But that again is my experience. Whether others have had entirely different ones, I believe.
And Karen, what is the most important thing you learned from your near death experience?
I guess I would have to say, um, I learned about the dangers of trying to feel that you can have all the answers and you know exactly what the answer is to everything, and therefore how one person over here is very, very wrong and another person over here is totally and completely right, and that everything that they are associated with must also be right. And, just the whole judgment, and then the following condemnation, or wrongness as you're seeing it, that you have to realize what you don't know and what you probably never will know, and always err on the side of loving and having compassion and caring and being kind, as opposed to violently opposing and violently judging, um, what initially appears to you as something that's bad or wrong.
And I think that's important coming from someone like you, because you had a background going into this of one of those people that were supposed to be kind of the chosen few. And so it's kind of interesting to hear your perspective that after you were there, you came back believing differently than you did when you went there.
Yeah, very much.
So, Karen, do you have any parting words for the people that are listening to this?
I guess the only thing I would like to say to anyone who's listening is, you know, please feel free to continue to explore whatever place you're at in terms of what you understand spirituality to be. Be open be free, explore for yourself, read and watch videos like this, and interact with people with an open heart and an open mind.
Thank you, Karen. I feel like you've answered so many questions that many of us have, and I really appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time to share your story. It really has been a wonderful conversation.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
Oh, it's great to have you, and great to have all of you that are listening as well. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being here as well. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please give it a like, and we would love to hear your comments and your thoughts on the things that we talked about today. So thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining me on Beyond with Heather Tesch. Please add comments and questions you'd like future guests to answer. Also, if you liked what you heard, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. That'll help keep this podcast going. You can also go to Beyond with Heather Tesch to look for more episodes.